In this exercise, we're going to work on the stitched pleat. No, this is the pattern, and we have a couple different markings here. We have notches, and then we have drill holes. So we need to punch those out. So let's go ahead and do that first, and then we'll talk about how this is going to be made. So punch all of these. Make sure that your notches are actually being notched in the direction of the notch that's drawn on the paper. And then we're going to punch these holes just so we can get through to create our markings. All right, so let's talk about how this is going to happen before we cut. So I have 3 different stitched pleats, and these notches, just like the knife pleats, I'm going to fold one notch over to meet the other notch. Now, the way this is actually going to be done is that we're actually going to be folding the notches on the face side of the fabric. So all the markings you'll see will be on the wrong side. So what I'm going to do is I'll fold this like this, and when I do, this drill hole here is the center of that fold. You may or may not always have that, but you will always have this other drill hole, and that signifies when you're going to stop. And you're going to stop a 1/4 inch beyond that drill hole, pivot, and then sew straight across. So again, we're going to fold the notch to notch, but we're going to make sure that the face sides are together. We'll stitch straight down past this drill hole, 1/4 inch, pivot, and sew directly over. So let's get this cut out, and then I'll show you the finished product. We'll talk a little bit more on the fabric. So I'm going to get this cut out. Okay, so now that I have everything cut out and marked, my notches here are clipped. Again, I said this side is the wrong side, so I'm going to flip this over. And I'm going to mark this as the face side. Turn this back over, and we'll go ahead and draw lines for the first one. And let me show you the finished product. So this is the face side, and you'll see that I have the pleats, which are folded over, and they're stitched all the way down to a certain point, and then it fans out to create some fullness. This would be a really cute design detail for a skirt. So the fullness is controlled up here. So, and if you notice that I talked about before, you can kind of still see my drill hole here. What I've done is I've sewn straight down, and I've stopped a 1/4 inch beyond that drill hole, pivoted, and I've sewn across. And what that does is it holds this fabric in place. It holds it from pulling out in the side. So your pleat, actually, if you're going to press them hard like I have here, what it will do, it will help the fabric to fall straight instead of maybe at an angle if I just stopped here. So we're going to sew it like this kind of L shape. And let's go ahead and mark this on the piece that we're going to sew. Now, of course, you're not going to have time in the industry to actually mark this, but what I'm going to do for the first one, which will help you, and if you need a little bit more help, go ahead and draw lines, sew lines for all 3 of them. Cut another one out and practice sewing without any sewing lines. So again, I said that I need to stop a 1/4 inch past this drill hole, because this drill hole is actually on my stitch line. Again, I'm going to be stitching like my fisheye darts. My stitch line will be about 1/8 of an inch away from that, and it lines straight up with this notch here. This other drill hole is the very center. This is the fold line. So if we look at this, I'm going to fold this notch together, notch on notch, and let's look at the inside. And then I have this drill hole here, which lines up with that, right? So I would fold this like this, and again, my notches up here together, and I'm folding on that other drill hole, which is the center of that pleat. And then I have my other drill hole, and my stitch line is going to be 1/8 of an inch away from that. Go further 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to stitch across here. So let me actually draw this line. So my stitch line is perpendicular here to my cut edge, and I'm going to actually, let me mark my 1/4 inch. That's where my 1/4 inch below this drill hole is. And so I'm going to stitch down to that point, and then I'm going to actually draw over to this drill hole here. All right, so I've drawn this L shape. Now if I fold my notches together again, I match the notches here, and then I folded it on that center drill line. You can see that now I've drawn my stitch line straight down past 1/4 inch. I'm going to pivot and sew straight across. And that's exactly what these are like, although these are going the other way, the opposite way. All right, so now that we're all ready with that, I'm just going to do the first one here with this stitch line for you, and then the others I will show you how to eye it in the machine without any stitch lines. So let's give this a go. Okay, so here we have some stitched pleats, and the difference between this and the regular knife pleats is that these pleats are going to be stitched all the way down. So we have the same notches for pleats, so we have 2 per pleat, but we also have some drill holes. So this drill hole that's down here I'm pointing to is actually the center between the 2 notches at the top. So when I fold these 2 notches together, we are folding right here at that drill hole. This other drill hole defines where we stop, and we're going to stitch past this drill hole about 1/4 inch and pivot, and we'll stitch straight across. So that's the line that we drew, if you remember. So this drill hole is actually inset about 1/8 of an inch from our stitch line. So the stitch line goes from our notch straight down, and we just passed that drill hole. Again, that drill hole identifies where we stop, 1/4 inch before where we stop to pivot. So I'm going to go ahead and match my notches by folding the face side together to my notches, and then again I'll make sure that I'm folding on that first drill hole, right? And then I'm going to stitch. Now you could pin this. I'm going to avoid pinning because it's folding over pretty nicely. You could even finger press that to keep it in place if you'd like. So I'm going to start off with a back stitch, and remember I have my stitch lines, so I'm going to stitch to 1/4 inch past. So I'm going to start with a back stitch real quick. So stitch straight down. Again, my stitching is going past that drill hole. I'm coming up to where I need to pivot. I think I'm going to stop, and I'm going to hand turn to that point. Make sure the needle's all the way down. Then I can lift the presser foot. I'm going to pivot, and it's a perpendicular stitch. When I stitch across, I'm going to back stitch just on the edge of the fabric. There you go, just 1 stitch is good enough. So I've done that pleat. I can remove the fabric. I can trim that close because I back stitched. All right, so that's the sewn pleat. That's the sewn, what it looks like. So if I turn it to the face side, this is what we get. So the pleat itself will be sewn all the way down, but then it will open up. And a lot of times this would be nice for maybe the bottom of a blouse if we stitch down a pleat, maybe it was a double-ended sewn pleat instead of fisheye style. That would be really pretty. This could also be the waist of a skirt, and then these just get released. What this stitching does here is it holds that fabric up in place at the height that we need it to be, instead of just stopping here. Sometimes if you have a really lightweight fabric, it may pull out and drape in different directions. So that's why we would use this type of a pleat. So let's finish the other 2. On the sample, I have 2 more. Let's do that without any markings. So again, I'm folding my notches to match each other, face side together, looking for that drill hole at the center. And then my stitch line, I'm going to start here at the notches and make sure that my stitch line is just past here on that other side of the width of the pleat. Okay, just kind of line up my fabric, and I'm going to stitch straight down. My stitching needs to be 1/8 of an inch away from that drill hole, and once we pass that drill hole about 1/4 of an inch, I put this needle down approximately. I'm going to pivot and I'll stitch right across. Of course, if you're not comfortable doing this by eye yet, go ahead and mark where you need to pivot and turn. Do one sample with the markings and then do a second sample without the markings. And I'm just going to repeat this process again. Fold the notches face side together, match the notches up at the top, find that center drill hole to align. Oops. A line there on that fold, and then we can stitch straight down. All right, just keep an eye on this drill hole, that it really is being sewn to the side of that drill hole, and just eye that 1/4 of an inch. That might be about right. You can lift your presser foot and just kind of look. Does that look like 1/4 of an inch? It looks okay. So I'm going to keep it. My thread. There we go. And then we can stitch across. Okay, and I've just finished all 3 of my stitched pleats. So they're ready to be pressed, and we'll choose a direction when we go to the pressing mat.